Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the main stage. My name is Catherine Graham. I'm the CEO of commonsku, and I'm going to be playing assistant chef on this next session with Aaron Couture, who's going to be joining us momentarily as he's just leading his breakout session. And we are going to be talking about smart scaling, how high-tech and lean teams equals fast growth. So the key pieces around this are around how you can be leveraging commonsku to be doing kind of more with less. And if any year has ever kind of forced us to fluctuate around resources and people and ups and downs in business with, unexpected explosions of, PPE demand and inventory challenges, and then, things tapering off at different times of the year, 2020 has definitely put us through our paces in that regard. So the opportunity that we want to talk about today is I think a lot of people have ended up kind of reevaluating their overall kind of structure and processes during this time to determine, how it is that they can be doing more with less. As unfortunately, people have had to, times of furloughing in the early days of the pandemic, and in some cases, you'll realize that they were able to continue to handle, the workload and be able to manage with a smaller team. So the question becomes kind of, yay, Aaron's here. In terms of, how it is to be able to position yourselves for what is going to be an amazing comeback for this industry in 2021. I have all the confidence in the world that we're going to be seeing an amazing resurgence coming as overall, the economy picks up steam and people kind of gain confidence in terms of buying, that it's going to be a fantastic year. So we want to talk about, how to position yourselves for that and make sure you're leveraging, all the capabilities within commonsku to maximize that. And Aaron is going to share his screen.
I've got so many tabs right now. It's a lot of tabs. I will share my screen. Don't worry.
He's just gonna, pick a random presentation and we'll just kind of talk to
you. Here you go. Here you go, Catherine. I'm just gonna make you go ahead and do this on your own. So, all right, I am gonna share my screen. I promise. Here we go. There we go. All right.
So I've done a bit of an intro already, talking about kind of doing more with less, and ultimately, how it is that we're going to talk through in this presentation. If you're just coming back to the main stage now, that the key thing we're going to talk about in this presentation is how to be leveraging kind of all the capabilities within commonsku to make sure that you are well positioned for scaling. So with that, Aaron, I'm going to turn it over to you.
So I think the theme of this is really just going to be letting the tech work for you. That's ultimately what this is about. And you can see in that kind of the screenshot up there, it's somebody who has cleverly thought about tying a string to their child's swing to be able to pull it while they're having a beer. And that's really just dad goals for me at this point.
It's actually Aaron.
Yeah, I wish. So we're going to work through kind of 6 things today, which I think creates a really, really scalable and efficient cycle. So we're going to talk about the right client, so how to find the right client, which leads into getting the right opportunities, ultimately getting smarter ideas, faster orders, how to efficiently manage those orders, and then when the order's all done, what are your numbers? And hopefully those numbers are going to lead you right back into the right client. So the right client, we're all searching for Mr. Right or Mrs. Right. In this case, it's 1990s Tom Hanks, which is my wife's biggest crush. So searching for Mr. Right or Mrs. Right here is all about kind of goal setting, client hygiene, and ultimately marketing. So the right client, setting goals inside of commonsku. You actually have the ability to set goals inside of our system by going to a client section and going and setting what is called a sales target. This is something that I talk to managers about all of the time and setting these sales targets. If you're a salesperson right now and you have a goal of $500,000, the sales target is a way for you to essentially go and plan that out in your client base. You can go to our reporting section and then go into the sales target report to see exactly how you're doing with all of your clients and where all of your goals are. And this is also something that's up front and center when you go into the client tab. So setting those goals and being able to track against those is going to be super important. Kind of the next thing down is client hygiene. I actually talk about project hygiene a little bit later. It's a very clean presentation. But client hygiene is all about having good data in, good data out. There's another way to say that, but we'll keep it PG. So good data in, good data out is all about using things like statuses and tags to be able to segment your clients out. If you have statuses that you're working through on what stage a prospect is with you, or if you're using tags to group clients together, ultimately those things are going to allow you to create more clean reporting. And it's also going to allow you to focus on the clients that are going to be important versus the ones who are inactive or have kind of fallen off of your radar, which you can ultimately also use statuses for to see those ones that you're trying to bring back in. So you can see kind of in this GIF, I'm going through and I'm pulling reports based off of the status, based off of the tag, and you can do all that directly from the client profile. So good hygiene ultimately means good marketing. Kate and Bobby were talking about this earlier, but you don't want to pass 40,000 contacts into HubSpot and only have 1,000 that are active. So this is a way, by using your tags, using your statuses, and making sure that your client list is staying up to date, that you can pass that information into something like HubSpot or MailChimp, or even be exporting that out of our mailing list report and then pulling that into Constant Contact, I think some people were saying, or another sort of marketing platform to ultimately create clean marketing campaigns. Nothing worse than sending out a campaign to 1,000 people and you get 950 bounce backs, right? So we want to try and keep that clean so the data coming out is nice and smooth going in. Again, good data in means good data out. So that'll hopefully lead to the right opportunity. So the right opportunity essentially has to do with project hygiene, making sure that you're filling out the necessary and kind of the mandatory pieces of what you need to know about a project, and then having an eye in the sky and getting to see absolutely everything. So you're focusing in on those really good opportunities and filtering out the ones that are going to be massive time suckers. So project hygiene, there's 3 key pieces to it. The first one is the enhanced state. Using a proper enhanced state, even if your client doesn't need one. Putting in enhanced state, so you're making a commitment to your client saying, we're going to get it to you by this day, is just a best practice. From there, also filling out your budget. The budget on the project ultimately allows you to put a value on a presentation or on an estimate. If you have a presentation in commonsku that has 20 items, we don't know how much that's worth, but you do. So if you put a budget in there, it allows you to see what are your high value presentations versus your low ones, and then you can allocate your time out properly. Right now, if you're not filling that out, you have a lot of zeros. And so it's really hard for you to focus in on what are the really big opportunities versus what are the ones that are going to be the same amount of time, but they're going to be a quarter of the value. The last piece is on projects being able to close stuff out. Closing out projects is super important. I get a request probably once every 3 months of somebody saying, can you please close all of my projects from the last 2 years that are not invoiced? So this is super important because moving a project to close does not do anything to it other than move it off of your active reports. So if you're not closing stuff off right now, you probably have like 300 open presentations. Again, that dilutes your reporting and doesn't allow you to focus on the ones that are important now. So closing stuff off just removes it off of those reports and allows you to focus on the stuff that is active, that needs your attention now. So it's just going to kind of keep everything clear and not really muddy it up.
Just one thing to add there.
Yeah,
the only reason why you need to close it is if the project's not moving forward. Otherwise, the whole process of invoicing removes it.
Yeah, exactly. So anything that's not going to go forward with a client, you want to make sure you're closing that out. Whether it's a presentation, an estimate, a sales order, any of those, you want to move it to close if it's kind of dead in the water. You can always reopen it. You still have access to it. It's just going to give you a clearer picture. So ultimately, we want you to be a Mufasa and don't be a Scar. We want you to own everything that the light touches. So with that, if you're doing all these project hygienes, this becomes your Mufasa moment where you go into the projects report and you can see everything. Everything here is yours and it's all clean. It's not dark and dingy like where Scar lives. I had to throw some sort of Lion King reference in there. I don't know why. But the projects report is probably one of the best and most underutilized tools on commonsku. For doing those maximize calls, if you're going in, putting your enhanced dates, putting your budgets, and going and closing stuff out, this gives you a direct report of everything you need to be focusing on. And you can see as I'm kind of scrolling through in this GIF that it's also going to allow you to feed through to the reporting section so you can see clean pipelines. You know, if I pull this pipeline open, I can see Mark Graham has 287 presentations. He doesn't really know what he's working on right now, right? So this projects tab ultimately allows you to see kind of everything you have and the value associated with that. And that's where, you know, that budget value on a presentation is going to come through. then you can update all those pieces of information straight from this report. So it's ultimately giving you the clearest picture of what you should be working on. And then you can even start to look at what are your high value pre-sale opportunities versus your lower value ones. So, we've done the right client, right opportunity. Now we need smarter ideas, faster ideas. So there's basically two ways to do smarter, faster ideas. There's all in the family and extended family. All in the family. If you guys are all at one company, you have 8 sales reps at one company, odds are you guys probably do very similar projects sometimes. So using that company feed on commonsku to be able to communicate with other salespeople about other projects or other presentations that you've done that you see them working on. So in this example, I saw that Joe was doing a new employee presentation. I can tell him, hey, I just did one for one of my clients, go check it out. And then Joe can go to my presentation I did for my client, and he can take some of the ideas that I did all that research from, and I can pull that over, he can pull that over into his presentation. Okay, speeding up that ideation process is massive. I said this in my breakout earlier, but the average salesperson spends 2 hours a day searching ESP or Sage. That is too much. That's like a quarter of your day just on a search engine. It's insane. I can't search Google for 2 hours a day. I'd run out of things to search. So, this is a way to cut it down and be able to share ideas. And sometimes you guys don't have all the ideas, but you know who does? Suppliers. Suppliers know their lines the best. So whether you're working on a pre-sale, like a presentation or an estimate, send out a collaboration request. Suppliers get these. It's private between you and the supplier. They can make those suggestions back to you. They all have dedicated people that are doing this. I actually had somebody reach out to me when they sent one of these out to say they got too many responses. So that's awesome, right? This is a great way to get ideas that are out of the box, or use collections. Kate was talking about this earlier in her presentation, but suppliers are creating these collections for you guys to look at and for you guys to essentially shop and add into your presentations. So cut down the ideation process, because half of it is already done for you through collections or getting the supplier to do it for you through Collaborate. So now you've landed the sale. So how do you do faster orders? Well, you do them using things like Smart Gallery or Shops, essentially. If you aren't using Smart Gallery, it's a step into the future, we'll say. It is a way for you to send a presentation to a client and the client can just order. Some people have low touch clients. The client doesn't want to trade 18 emails with you about different sizes and colors. They just want to order. So create a presentation, send it out as a Smart Gallery, and let the client order. When they order, you get notified. It creates a sales order, and then you can go ahead and add in shipping or any of those other charges that you need to the sales order. You can add those in after they place the order on here and then still send that out for confirmation. Instead of trading all those emails back and forth, get the client to do it for you. And ultimately, you're going to land that sale faster and save having to trade that. And again, talking about time suckers and saving that time so you can spend it scaling your business. This is a great way to be able to do it. The other way is Shops. I don't have a GIF here, so it's just a screenshot of Shops, but I think Shops are a great solution for a lot of different things. And I think that if you have clients that are going to place those $100 or $200 orders every 3 months, once a quarter or whatever, build a shop, right? It's not worth the time. If they're going to pick one item this quarter, a different item next quarter, a different one, send them a shop, a company shop. You spending hours on an order that is $200, $300, it's not, you're losing money at that point if you are spending that much time putting together a custom presentation, doing all the back and forth. A shop is a solution to that. It can be something for those really small micro orders that you're going to get from the client. Curate some products for them and then send it out. Tell them, hey, this is where you can order. Let them place the orders, and then you're extracting yourself from that situation and allowing yourself to put that towards something that's going to be ultimately higher value. So what happens after we get those orders? We're on kind of like the upswing, the backside of it all, right? How do you efficiently manage these orders after they've been placed? Well, you have to have a pulse on production. You need to take action. And P.S. I love you. I didn't have anything funny to write about promo standards, so that's as good as it gets. So on commonsku, one of the things that I talk to especially prospects about a lot is how are you managing your POs? You send your POs to the vendor, how are you managing them? And people say Excel sheets, boards, filing cabinets. Some people say production, that's great. But if you are currently managing your POs through your email or through a spreadsheet, it's not scalable. It's not something that you can have somebody join your company and say, here's your spreadsheet where you can write down your POs and then go through and just manually type and update them. It's too freeform. The production report allows this kind of like freedom, but also scalability to your process where it puts everything on rails. If you're already using the production report, awesome. There's obviously advanced things that you can be doing in there, creating custom reports and moving columns and changing what's showing. If you're not using it, it might be intimidating in the beginning. You don't have to use all of it at the exact same time. Start with something like updating your different statuses. This is what's going to ultimately push your process along, but putting your process on rails as much as you can allows it to be something that's more scalable. So using the production report and having a feel of what is going on with all of your POs at the same time is really going to be a massive advantage to you. And it might be a little bit of work up front learning how to do this, but ultimately it's going to save you tons and tons of time of having to dig through your email. The next thing is the next action. I talked about putting everything on rails. This is a great way to do it. Inside of our production report, you can create custom next actions. This is essentially the way for you to go through and set what needs to happen next on each PO. You can choose the list, you create it, you can choose the order things happen in, but this is creating something that says, okay, this needs to happen. When this is done, you move it to the next one. Then when that thing happens, move it to the next one. Again, thinking about a scalable process, this is a way to do it by creating, okay, what are the things our company has to do on every PO? Create those as your next actions and make it a hard and fast rule that it has to move through those. You guys will start to remember that, and it's not something you're going to have to reference that list and be like, oh, what happens next? If you're able to define those actions as a company. And then finally, PS, I love you, promo standards, I love you. This is ultimately like the future, essentially, of production. You know, whenever I tell people promo standards, do you order anything online where you then have to call the person you ordered to find out what's going on with it? No, you don't. That's just not how society works anymore. So you can check the status of everything online. That's what promo standards allows you to do. It allows you to pull in products with preset pricing, pulling in setup costs, and ultimately on the order status side, allows you to click on that blue button in your production report to see what is going on with that order right now. You're not picking up the phone and calling a supplier. The supplier doesn't have to pick up the phone to tell you a tracking ID. You click on a button and then there it is. For, coming to this industry 6 years ago, I was a little bit, miffed that this was something that didn't already exist. The industry is a little bit behind inside of tech, and this is kind of the future of it, of being able to get that stuff in real time, like you can literally everywhere else. So using promo standards, getting your credentials in there, reaching out to suppliers to get your credentials are massive for you to be able to get those order status updates and spend way less time on the phone. If you're calling vendors right now, think about how much time you spend on the phone talking to them. What if you didn't have to do that anymore? What would you do with all that time? So very last thing is know your numbers. We got Watch Me Whip and weather forecasting with our local meteorologist, David Schultz. So we've got our WIP report inside of commonsku. I was just talking about this in my breakout, but the work in progress report allows you to do things like a margin comparison. It also allows you to see if you're in accrual accounting, seeing what you have in terms of total value of bills that has not been invoiced. So this really gives you a cash flow forecasting and seeing how much you're spending on your bills and revenue that you're waiting for currently. And then on the other side of it, it allows you to do margin comparisons like I'm clicking on there. I'm sure will come up again, but that one order had a booked margin of 35% and a billed margin of negative 1,400%. Well, now I can go and see why and what happened. So using that margin report to review it ultimately will lead you to better clients. And then looking at this for cash forecasting is another way to see what have you spent on your bills versus what are you waiting to come in the door in terms of receivables. The last thing is, today's a night, I had to throw a Canadianism in here of nice day today, So this is a way to use the operations and client invoicing report as a way to forecast as well. So inside of your operations section, you can use the sales orders in production to forecast, and you can also use that projects report I was talking about earlier to be able to do forecasting as well. So this allows you to search by in-hand state and see what you have expecting to land. So again, you can see what cash is going to be coming in the door and being able to do all of that cash flow forecasting. If you're able to do all these things, it leads you all the way back to the very beginning, right? If we look at our cycle, brings us all the way back to then identifying the right client, because you have good data, faster orders, efficiency. You know your numbers, you can see who your high margin clients are, and then you can choose who to work with. So now Catherine is going to talk a little bit about time vampires. What's a time vampire?
So we've been talking a lot about, what it is that you should be spending time on, but it's equally as important to talk about things that maybe you shouldn't be spending time on. So the first one that I wanted to talk about is analysis paralysis. So we get, what my favorite one in this area is, we get questions about categorization. So how do I know, how many hats that I bought, or how many, t-shirts that I bought, and ultimately being able to kind of, Aaron, back up. You're spoiling me a show here.
I don't want to ruin the show.
Of ultimately being able to have that insight. And the question that I always ask is, if you know that you're spending, that you've bought, a ton of hats as an example, and you're thinking, all right, well, I want to get other clients to buy hats that aren't buying hats. If your client doesn't need a hat, you're not going to sell them a hat. So there isn't necessarily, amazing insight that's changing your decision making as far as how it is that you're approaching clients by spending time analyzing categories. So just be wary of kind of what it is that you use your time to spend, or use your time in terms of analyzing data, and some of the things that Aaron mentioned around, which clients are driving your best margin, which clients are driving your best conversion. There is a ton of data in the sales rep report that you can dig into, which would be a great use of time versus other areas that might not be as informative in terms of decision making. So the next pocket is one of all of our favorite topics, is samples. I'm sure many of you have areas like this in your office or in a warehouse where you have the chaos of managing samples. So there's two aspects that I want to talk about with samples. One of which is the overall just kind of tracking and dealing with the physical, aspect of it. And a lot of people feel the need to maintain a huge amount of samples in their office. And I think what's interesting is that when COVID happened and we all had to move to work from home, and that none of us had an option to be able to have a sample kind of warehouse anymore, somehow we managed. So letting go of that safety blanket, it's just as easy to be able to order kind of a new sample and send it right to the client than having to figure out what you actually have kind of in your closet or warehouse and be able to keep track of that. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is tracking sample cost. I see a lot of time spent on allocating sample costs back to a specific order, or tracking, a budget per rep in terms of how much they're spending on samples. And what I would say is take a look at the amount of time that it takes to track that in terms of the admin kind of burden and overhead that it takes to manage all that versus what the trade-off is. In very few instances are your reps actually mismanaging kind of sample usage. Are they taking, spending too much money on samples? If you're training them on, judicious use of when a sample is actually needed to close a sale versus when it's kind of superfluous, then they're going to be smart in terms of how it is that they use that money accordingly. So spending a huge amount of time kind of tracking that and managing budgets might be time spent, better time spent elsewhere. And the last one that I want to talk about is lots of conversations about credit card fees and the time kind of spent on chasing receivables versus being willing to take credit card payments. I think one of the really interesting things that happened during COVID in particular, and PPE was a big driver behind this, is that all of a sudden a lot of people shifted to requiring prepayment before they were going to send an order out. And with the huge rise in e-commerce and people getting used to that kind of in their consumer lives, you always pay for an order before it ships out. That shifting kind of that overall timing in terms of when it is that you're collecting payment offsets a couple things in terms of that additional credit card fee. First of all, you've got cash in the bank right away. And second of all, you're not then chasing a receivable. You'll say, oh, if I want to let the client, have terms and not incur that cost. But usually you're having to touch that invoice kind of multiple times in terms of following up and then dealing with the receipt of the actual payment itself. So just think about that in terms of balancing off time spent on chasing receivables versus credit card fees. So those are the three kind of buckets of time vampires that we wanted to talk about, and that concludes the overall presentation on this. So go forth and scale, take advantage of this amazing rebound that we're going to see in 2021 and be able to leverage all this technology to handle way more sales. So it is time for our breakout sessions right now, our next set of breakouts. And there are 3 different sessions to choose from, 2 for distributors and 1 for suppliers. The 2 for distributors are Working Smarter with commonsku, being hosted by Aaron Burley and Kate Mazowich. And the second one for distributors is Death, Taxes, and Chocolates with our very own Aaron Couturier and Jason Davis from Avalara. And the supplier one is on Connect Suppliers Insights and Analytics Deep Dive, Know Your Numbers. So head on over to the left navigation to the sessions area and choose one of the breakouts. And we'll see you back at the main stage after.